Chapter 3, Douluo Continent. Tang San nodded. The blacksmith profession was undoubtedly the most suitable for forging hidden weapons. Dad, you're getting older. In a few more years. When I grow up a bit, you can teach me how to forge tools and I'll take over your work, okay? In his previous life, all the forging he had done was for the most intricate hidden weapons. He had no experience with the simpler stuff. Tang Hao was momentarily dazed. He murmured, being a blacksmith seems pretty good. He pulled over an old chair and sat directly in front of the piece of iron, then said, Little San, tell me, what makes someone the best blacksmith? Tang San thought for a moment and replied, a blacksmith who can forge divine weapons must be the best blacksmith. He had heard the villagers mention that divine weapons existed in this world, though he didn't really know what they were. But anything with the word divine in it had to be impressive. A playful glint flashed in Tang Hao's eyes. Divine weapons? So even you know about divine weapons, huh? Then tell me, what are divine weapons made from? Without hesitation, Tang San replied, of course only the best materials. Tang Hao raised a finger and waved it in front of Tang San. If you want to be a qualified blacksmith, remember what I'm telling you. Using top-grade materials to forge divine weapons doesn't make you a great blacksmith. Best, you're just an assembler. But making a divine weapon from common iron, that's what makes a divine craftsman. Making divine weapons from ordinary iron? Tang San looked at Tang Hao in shock. Usually, Tang Hao barely spoke to him, but today he had said more than usual. Standing up, Tang Hao pointed toward the room at a 50 square centimeter block of crude iron. If you want to become a blacksmith and learn from me, then first, use that hammer and strike this block 10,000 times. Only then will you be qualified. That was just a regular block of iron, full of impurities far inferior to the refined piece Tang San had seen earlier. You can still change your mind, Tang Hao said indifferently, already preparing to go back inside and sleep. Dad, I want to give it a try, Tang San answered, his voice clear and calm, but filled with determination. Tang Hao looked at him with mild surprise. Good. Then he walked over, lifted the block of iron and placed it next to the bellows by the furnace. With the fire lit, the forging could begin. After that, Tang Hao went back inside to sleep. Tang San was a person with strong willpower. Otherwise, in his previous life, he wouldn't have been able to create the Buddha Fury Tang Lotus, the most advanced hidden weapon in the Tang Sect. Based only on a damaged blueprint, it had taken him 10 years. He lit the fire, started working the bellows, and began his task. Hoo hoo hoo. The bellows roared as flames flared up from the furnace, heating the block of iron. Although Tang San had never forged anything before, he had often watched Tang Hao work on farming tools. He was familiar with the process. Once the iron was glowing red, he picked up Tang Hao's usual forging hammer and placed it on the ground. This long-handled hammer was even taller than he was. Normal 5- or 6-year-old children wouldn't even be able to lift it, let alone swing it. But Tang San still picked it up. Using his inner strength from the Xian Tian skill, even though he hadn't yet broken through the first level, he already had the strength of an adult. Clang! The hammer struck the iron block, producing a clear ringing sound. This was Tang San's first strike, the beginning of his journey into the world of forging. Inside the room, Tang Hao lay on the bed turning slightly. Though his eyes were closed, his expression carried a trace of surprise as he murmured, he could actually lift the hammer. Born with divine strength. Clang, 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 clang. The sound of hammering began to ring out from the forge. Tang Hao and Tang San resumed their quiet life. But from that day on, something had changed. Tang Hao prepared a small furnace inside the house specifically for Tang San to forge that piece of iron himself. He didn't give Tang San a single instruction. But from that day on, he drank less and there was noticeably more food in the house. Forging was undoubtedly a dull and exhausting process. Yet Tang San treated it as a form of tempering for his body. 11 days passed and he continued to count every strike. Without the support of Xiantian's skill, there was no way he could swing the forging hammer with just physical strength. He could manage around 100 hammer strikes before depleting his inner energy. Once drained, he would sit cross-legged on the floor to recover. As soon as his inner energy was restored, he resumed forging. This wasn't just physical training. Repeated exhaustion and recovery served as powerful tempering for both his cultivation of Xiantian's skill and his willpower. Unfortunately, the bottleneck of the first level of Xiantian's skill remained an unbreakable wall. Tang San wasn't slacking in his training. His talent was sufficient. He simply couldn't break through to the second level. But his efforts weren't wasted. Even if Xiantian's skill didn't advance, his internal strength was becoming more refined through the forging process, and his recovery speed had subtly increased. After 11 days, Tang San had delivered over 8,000 hammer strikes. The iron block had shrunk to less than a third of its original size. With his improved diet and physical conditioning, his body had become noticeably stronger. It felt as if a stream of power was being released from within, pouring steadily into him, gradually reducing the amount of inner energy required per strike. At the same time, his physical strength was growing significantly. When he had completed 8,000 hammer strikes, the iron block had clearly changed, shrinking slightly. And although it glowed red-hot from the flames, the number of visible impurities had noticeably decreased. Asterisk 100 times tempered into steel. Asterisk. This phrase suddenly appeared in Tang San's mind, strengthening his resolve to complete the full 10,000 strikes. And now he was very close. Tang San's persistence surprised Tang Hao greatly. In his eyes, even if his son was born with divine strength, he shouldn't have lasted more than 3 days. The hammer handle was crude and thick. Constant use would inevitably grind harshly against the palms, causing serious injuries. Yet he noticed that despite forging so diligently, Tang San's small, delicate hands showed no visible change, not even a single blister. Tang San didn't want to lose this father figure, and he didn't want his past life to be discovered. Naturally, he didn't tell Tang Hao the real reason. He had been cultivating mysterious jade hand, Xianyu hand. To effectively use hidden weapons, the most essential foundations were visual strength, hand strength, and mental focus combined into one. As the saying went, where the mind goes, the eyes follow. Where the eyes go, the hands follow. That's why in the Tang Sect's inner training methods, both eyesight and hand strength were rigorously trained. The purple demon eye Zgmo Tong relied on the brief moment during sunrise, absorbing the purple energy rising from the east to strengthen vision. Mysterious jade hand, Xianyu hand, hardened the hands to an extraordinary degree and could even resist poisons. Both techniques were mandatory for inner disciples of the Tang Sect. Though Tang San's Xianyu hand had not yet reached a high level of mastery, it was more than sufficient to protect his palms from developing blisters. Just a bit more. I can finish it today. Tang San gritted his teeth and swung the hammer again. The process was dull, but his heart was far from calm. His understanding of this world was still very shallow. After all, this was just a small village. This world was called the Douluo Continent. On the continent, there were 2 great empires, or more accurately 2 alliances. Within each empire, large portions of land were granted to feudal lords, and the noble class possessed countless armed forces. One of the empires was where Tang San currently lived, the Heaven Do Empire. The other, located to the south, was the Star Luo Empire. The Fazana province sat at the border between the 2 empires, and from Saint Sol village to Nordine city was less than 200 li, about 100 kilometers, away from the Star Luo Empire. Tang San had learned from the villagers' conversations that on the Douluo Continent, there wasn't martial arts like in his previous world. Instead, there was something called martial spirits, *wuhuan*. It was said that every person possessed their own unique martial spirit. Among them, a very small number had martial spirits that could be cultivated, allowing them to take up a profession called Spirit Master, Huncher **. And on this continent, spirit masters were the most respected and noble profession. Just like the spirit saint from St. Soul village 100 years ago, he was a spirit master. Spirit saint was a title granted to a spirit master who had reached a certain level. Martial spirits were divided into two main categories, tool spirits and beast spirits. As the names implied, those whose martial spirits were tools had tool spirits. Those whose spirits were animals had beast spirits. Comparatively, tool spirits were more common and covered a wider range. The vast majority of people had tool spirits. But among tool spirits, the number of those that couldn't be cultivated was far greater than beast spirits. Tang San had once met a villager whose martial spirit was a hoe, a clear example of a spirit that couldn't be cultivated. Even so, it still gave him slightly more efficiency when farming compared to ordinary villagers. This was all Tang San knew so far. Since everyone had their own martial spirit, he naturally wanted to know what his was. Was it a tool spirit or a beast spirit? Or perhaps, a martial spirit that couldn't be cultivated at all? On the Douluo Continent, martial spirits awakened at age 6. In just a few more days, Tang San would turn 6. For some reason, he vaguely felt that his inability to break through the first layer of Shantian skill was somehow connected to his martial spirit. Tang San didn't have much interest in becoming a spirit master, but he had vowed to become a top-level hidden weapon expert on the level of the Tang Sect's inner disciples. And for that, how could he lack internal strength? Tang Hao busy? While Tang San was working hard to reach 10,000 hammer strikes, he heard an elderly voice calling from outside. It was already afternoon. Tang Hao was working forging farming tools. Upon hearing the voice, he merely gave a grunt in response. Tang San, curious, stepped out of his room and saw an old man who appeared to be in his 60s, tall and thin but full of spirit. His clothes were clean, his hair was neatly combed, a complete contrast to Tang Hao. Tang San knew this man. He was the village elder of St. Soul village, Old Jack. Little San, come here and let Grandpa take a look. Old Jack waved to him kindly. This village chief was a good man, respected by everyone in the village. A few years back, when Tang San's family was struggling the most, it was Old Jack who had often brought them food. Grandpa Jack, hello. Tang San walked up respectfully and greeted him with a bow. He never forgot those who had treated him well. Tang Hao said coldly, what is it, village chief? In truth, Old Jack wasn't even 10 years older than Tang Hao. But he belonged to an elder generation, which always made Tang Hao feel a bit irritated. Old Jack was clearly used to Tang Hao's attitude. Tang Hao, little San will be 6 soon. He should participate in the spirit awakening ceremony this year. Tang Hao glanced at Tang San and replied coolly, let him participate then. When is it? Old Jack said, 3 days from now. I'll come by and pick him up. From the look in his eyes, it was clear what he meant. If we leave it to you to bring him, you'll probably delay or forget it. Tang Hao nodded and didn't pay any further attention to the village chief. Tang San, still curious, asked, Grandpa Jack, what is the spirit awakening ceremony? Old Jack's face grew serious as he explained. Each of us is born with our own martial spirit. Around the age of 6, we undergo the spirit awakening ceremony. Having a martial spirit enhances our abilities in many ways. Even the most ordinary martial spirit will bring some kind of benefit. But if, by chance, you awaken an exceptional martial spirit, one that can be cultivated, then you could become a spirit master. The spirit awakening ceremony only happens once a year. I can't let you miss it. A representative from the Spirit Hall branch in Nuoding City will personally come to help the children in our village awaken their spirits. That representative is a spirit master who has reached the rank of Grand Spirit Master. As he spoke the words Grand Spirit Master, there was clear admiration in Old Jack's eyes. Tang San had only heard a little about spirit masters before. Now that he had the chance, he wasn't about to let it slip by. He quickly asked, what does Grand Spirit Master mean?